trying to get myself started at the moment.
Yeah, it started now. We can go ahead.
Okay. So, welcome everybody. Thank you for joining this. I know there wasn't a lot of notice, but I'm excited about this. Mason from Micro Focus has very kindly agreed to demonstrate the benefits of using the UI test automation tool UFT Developer, which is the tool I'm hoping is going to be the way forward for Travelport as it moves towards a DevOps and BDD environment. Also on the call, as you've just heard, is Phil, our sales contact at Micro Focus now. Now, we've worked with Mason for several years, and both Mason and Phil are outstanding. So this should be a good demo. Just for the record, we have plenty of spare licenses for UFT Developer in-house because it uses the same license as UFT1, which is the new name for what we just used to call UFT or QTP if you go back that far. So as I said, we've got a lot of material to cover in an hour, and there is a hard stop at the top of the hour, but there should be time for questions and answers towards the end. And so with all that being said, I'm going to hand it over to Phil and Mason.
Thanks, Graham. So as Graham mentioned, my name is Mason Henry. I'm a ADM solution architect, or what we call application delivery management, a solution architect with Micro Focus. And basically that's everything from planning to production when it comes to the Micro Focus solutions. Today, obviously, we're going to be talking about some of the functional testing capabilities, more specifically our UFT developer solution, which is our shift left focus when it comes to functional testing, embedding these types of capabilities and tools within the IDE with development languages and testing frameworks of choice. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. And I wanted to start out by kind of showing the overall where UFT Developer fits within the Micro Focus functional testing portfolio, as well as the capabilities that have been built into the solution. So really what we see is a number of different personas in the marketplace when it comes to test automation. And that ranges from your centralized QA automation engineers, which is much subject matter expertise and how to build frameworks and creating automated tests, and been doing it for many years. And honestly, that's Graham. to be quite honest, that is right where Graham fits, and that is a strength that he's brought to the Travelport team when it comes to building frameworks for automation. But there's also kind of the shift right as well as shift left. So when we talk about shift right, that's really focused on that business analyst, that domain expert that has a lot of subject matter expertise in the workflows, the business processes, how an application or set of applications should be validated from an end-to-end standpoint, but don't necessarily have the ability to write code, right? They don't have that same technical capabilities that perhaps our shift left focus might when we see developers being introduced into testing more and more. Introduction of new type of persona called a dev tester that we see often. And really that's to shift left the focus on quality to start building testing early on in the life cycle, even as far left as implementing tests before code has even been written. So leveraging concepts and frameworks like TDD and BDD to be able to enable that capability of shifting quality left and shifting quality earlier in the life cycle. Obviously, that's going to be different personas with different skill sets. So we want to be able to offer solutions that cater to each one of those personas, and that's really how we organize the functional testing solutions from Micro Focus, but also building that all on top of a digital lab to be able to connect to emulated mobile devices, real mobile devices, hosted mobile devices, as well as a service virtualization platform for many different technologies, whether that's APIs and IoT devices and sensors. Building that into a platform, as well as some of those capabilities directly into our functional testing solutions, gives all of those personas the ability to extend the type of technologies that they can test, as well as allowing those different personas to be able to build smarter and more resilient automation by building in things like AI and machine learning and natural language processing into those functional testing products, so that we can cut down on test creation time, cut down on the time that it takes to maintain those automated tests by building those types of technologies in. So obviously today we're going to be focused on the UFT developer solution, but I just wanted to give an understanding of where that fits in the broader Micro Focus portfolio of functional testing solutions, as well as some of the breadth, as well as the lab technology that we have built into these functional testing solutions as well. So with that, this is our last slide, and then we'll hop into the demo so that we can spend the majority of our time there based on the limited time window we have today. But from UFT Developer, just as I said before, this is our focus around shifting left, taking functional testing, giving that into the hands of developers and dev testers within an IDE using their language of choice and testing frameworks of choice. So really when we talk about shifting left and accelerating delivery, that means giving these types of tools embedded into that development environment. So that's being able to leverage modern IDEs, things like Eclipse, Visual Studio, and IntelliJ, to be able to have that development environment be your intro into being able to use this solution. Also being able to connect to your testing frameworks of choice, whether that be a unit test framework like JUnit or InUnit or TestNG, or whether that be bringing in concepts like BDD, connecting to solutions like Cucumber to be able to translate those feature files into automation that we can build with the UFT Developer SDK, as well as having this embedded into that full CI/CD DevOps lifecycle of SCM tools and CI/CD solutions, so that this can be an embedded part of that framework. Also being able to enhance open source testing. So when I talk about enhance open source testing, really what that boils down to is being able to extend Selenium by what we've contributed to the Selenium SDK. So that comes in a couple of different ways that we'll get more into in the demo as far as the tools that come with UFT Developer. So those are added to be able to leverage the Selenium SDK for automation, as well as we've extended the locators that you're able to use with the Selenium SDK. So whereas Selenium is more or less limited to XPath and CSS, we've added somewhere along the lines of 6 or 7 different object locators for your Selenium tests, so that you can make those Selenium tests more robust, so that they break less often when your application changes. And as we all know, with things like Agile and DevOps in the world today, that our applications are frequently changing, causing a lot of headache when it comes to maintenance of our automated scripts. When it comes to accelerated test execution, really what that means is boiling down to quicker test creation, lower test maintenance, by introducing tools to help leverage or help enable those two things. So that comes down to a tool called the recorder that we're able to have that generates actions within an application into, today I'll be using Java code, but that applies to Java, JavaScript, C# as well, and being able to do things like testing in parallel across multiple browsers, as well as having object identification tools so that you can very quickly see all of the unique object properties about that object, not just CSS selectors or XPath, but a whole host of different unique object properties that you can use to uniquely identify any given object or edit field or text within your application. Also being able to eliminate bottlenecks. I quickly talked about the service virtualization capability. We have a full-on service virtualization solution to remove those dependencies and virtualize services and APIs and even mainframe that we can virtualize. But we've taken a small portion of that technology of service virtualization and actually embedded it into our UFT developer solution within the IDE, so that as a developer or a dev tester, I can very easily identify and see the different APIs and services that my application uses, as well as then capture the data model for that and virtualize those all within the IDE. so that when an application or a service is not ready, is unreachable, or is sort of locked down because of security or cost when it comes to that sensitive data, then I have the ability directly within my IDE to virtualize those services so that I can continue testing or continue building my application without that dependency. Then improving visibility and reporting by having robust reporting, the ability to drill down and understand root cause when it comes to my functional tests, as well as being able to embed things like screenshots and snapshots for the application directly into those reports, and to be able to view those reports from a number of different ways, whether that be from directly within the tool, from your lifecycle management solution, or within the CI/CD pipeline reporting, or as Graham has done with the test factory, that we are able to report results there as well to your own frameworks. And then we're able to, that last piece is creating efficiencies through integrations. So not just integrations from the Micro Focus standpoint, from the Micro Focus portfolio, which they are there. So being able to have integrations to, for instance, leverage your UFT one object repositories and translate those into consumable artifacts from UFT Developer, or vice versa, being able to connect to mobile devices and emulators with our UFT mobile solution, but also through open source and third-party vendor solutions that we have as well. So several that I mentioned there, of being able to be embedded into the IDE, being able to store and version these tests as code in source code management solutions like Git, and being able to have this all executed as a part of your CI/CD practice with integrations into CI servers like Jenkins and Bamboo and such. So any questions thus far as we hop into the demo?
Will this work with things that are not web-based, like WinForms, that kind of thing?
Excellent question. Excellent question. Yes. So there is a whole host of technologies beyond web and mobile that UFT Developer is able to support, even within the same test. And I'll show how we would be able to add those things in here in just a moment. Excellent question, though.
Thank
The answer
you.
is yes. So the first thing that I want to point out is that currently I'm on a Linux machine right now, and I have a couple of things running as Docker containers. So I have my application under test running as a Docker container in 3 different containers. So I have my my AUT database, my application under test has a service component or an API, and then the application itself. And I have 2 other containers running. I have an IntelliJ container, which actually has the UFT developer plugin and engine embedded within that container. As you can see, here's IntelliJ that's up and running right now. And I have a DevOps container. And within that DevOps container, I cheated and didn't use these as microservices, but I have my Git repositories as well as my CI server, in this case Jenkins, within that DevOps container. So just to give you an understanding of, we are fully integrated into modern practices and technologies like containerization using Docker and such to be able to use these types of solutions, and across multiple platforms. So I don't just have to use this on Windows. I can use install and run UFT Developer in an IDE on Linux or Windows or Mac as well. So with that being said, and to the question that was asked earlier, let me hop into that. So I'm going to create a new project. We're going to create a new test. So in its most basic form, UFT Developer is a engine that is able to run tests. And from an IDE perspective, it's a plugin with several tools and an SDK. So that's kind of the 3 core concepts. Is there's tools involved with UFT Developer, there is the SDK, and then the runtime engine. So all of that comes as, it's like, I don't know, 500 meg or something plugin into an IDE, very small plugin to be able to add into your IDE. And the first thing you'll see here is once I did that, I have this option for creating a project type of UFT developer. And I have several options. I can create an application model project, I can create a testing project, or I can create a Cucumber project. So basically what we're doing here is that we have created project templates for these different options so that you don't have to spend this time building a framework or adding all of the right jars and such every single time when you create a new test or a new project, testing project. All of those things are embedded in there for you so that test creation can be quick as well as repeatable when it comes to either creating those test projects or new tests within those projects. So when I'll get to what an application model is here in a moment, but for those UFT1 users on the phone today or have ever used that, this is similar to the object repository. This is a way to store object property and objects so that they can be reusable across the enterprise so that multiple developers, dev testers, and automation engineers can be able to leverage work that's already been done. So there's an aspect of reusability when it comes to the application model project, as well as cutting down on the time that it takes to maintain those things. So obviously, if I have 1,000 test cases that all leverage a similar set of objects, and if I'm all maintaining those, if I'm maintaining all of those individually, then if something about that object changes, then I have to go to every single one of those test projects to be able to update that. Or I can use a shared application model project that can be stored and versioned as code in a repository like Git. And I can do all the things that you can do with version control solutions, like being able to have branches and such, so that you can keep that application module project up to date as well as shared across the enterprise. So I'll get to an example of how we would use that. But we'll also have a testing project, which I'm going to use today, and a Cucumber project. So basically, the Cucumber project is adding in all of the Cucumber-related items, as well as setting up the project structure to be able to leverage those technologies. Because, as I'm sure some of you on the phone today know of, sort of the concept of BDD, behavior-driven development, is that we have a feature file that is sort of in near common language as far as how we write that. There is some syntax and what we call gherkin, but basically that is created into a feature file. And then using the Cucumber technology or Cucumber capability, you can translate that feature file, which is written in near common language, into methods that can be executed in an automated way. So you can use the UFT Developer SDK to actually create that automation. And if we have time, I'll show a quick example of what we've done there. But for today, I'm going to use the UFT Developer testing project. And I'm going to use my testing framework as JUnit today. I can select which automation SDK that I want to use, either the UFT Developer SDK or the Selenium SDK, again, that we have added additional locators to. So to make your Selenium tests more robust, I'm going to use the UFT Developer SDK today. And I can create this as a Maven project so that I can automatically pull in all of my jars and dependencies that I have in my local Maven repository. All right, so we've just created a new test. And as I mentioned, so I'm going to add this as Maven project and pull in all my dependencies. So as I create this, the project structure here has been created for me based on that project template. So I can see that a number of things have been done. One, that all of my JUnit dependencies and my UFT developer dependencies and such have been added in my POM file automatically because of Maven. But we've also had the test structured in a way based on those test fixtures, as you see here, based on the JUnit framework. So I can see that I have my before class, my after class, so that if I have things that I want to do, if I have multiple test fixtures that I can, for instance, launch a browser, clear the cache, or close a browser as my before and after classes within this specific project, I have the ability to leverage the strengths of the unit test framework, in this case, JUnit, and I don't have to come in and create this, that it's embedded as a part of that project template. So when it comes to cutting down on the time that it takes to actually set up and create the test, I'm ready to go. I can start building automation right now. So with that, into the question that was asked earlier about different technologies, the answer is absolutely yes. So I am here to add in, reference my TK. I can see that there's a number of different things that I can add. So I can have the ability to test web technologies with text, what's called insight technology, which is using OCR and bitmap recognition, Java applications, mobile, Oracle, Power Builder, SAP, standard Windows, even terminal emulation. We can automate within UFT Developer. WinForms and WPF are included as well. I think that was mentioned as well. So broad technology support when it comes to what we're able to automate with UFT Developer SDK. Of course, web is on that list, and that's what I'm going to use for our example today, though. So I'll reference that. So from here, again, I have the test fixture already set up for me. And so before the test, I actually want to do the process of setting up a browser, or launching a browser rather, and navigating to my URL. So I'll add that line within my code quickly here. And it's giving me recommendations of how to finish that out. I'll actually reference that publicly up here. And we'll navigate to our application under test. And as part of the setup, I will clear the cache. All right, so we have our setup done. We're going to launch the browser. We're going to launch a Chrome browser. We're going to navigate to our application under test, in this case called advantageonlineshopping.com, and then we're going to clear the browser cache so that we're fresh and ready for the test. So I can come down to my test fixture now to be able to actually build out some automation. So there's a number of different ways that we can start to do that. And the first thing that I'm going to do here is that I'm going to run this to actually launch the browser for us, so that we can start capturing some objects. So while it's doing this, obviously I could have multiple. Is there a question? If somebody wouldn't mind going on mute, I think there's some feedback coming through. Thank you. All right, so obviously I have multiple test fixtures within this. I'm just going to have one today, and again, those before and after classes would be able to be the setup and the teardown after each one of these test fixtures. It looks like our browser is launched now, and we've navigated to our advantageonlineshopping.com, so our application under test. Now I want to be able to capture some objects. So from here, there's a couple of different tools that I come embedded with UFT Developer as a plugin into the IDE. One is the test recorder, and one is the object identification center. So I'm going to start by using the test recorder, which is going to capture all of my steps and then be able to translate those into, in this case, Java code in a descriptive way. So I will start my test recorder, and we can select a couple of objects within our application. So I'll start recording, and we'll select the speakers object, and then I'll decide to navigate back to the home page, and that's the objects that we want to capture right now. So a couple of things that I can see here. I can see that it's giving me description of what my action was within the application, and I can expand that to see all of the actions that I've taken. So the first thing that I did was I clicked the speakers category link, and then I clicked the Advantage Demo home link to navigate back to the home page. So I'm going to stop the recording, and I can either export those steps to CSV file. So if I'm actually creating my test case here, that I have the ability to do that, or in this case, I'm just going to generate that code to the clipboard. And I'm going to be able to directly paste that into my script. So UFT Developer Test Recorder automatically captured some of the unique object identification properties that would describe these specific objects. In this case, we navigated to the speakers category, and then we navigated back to the home page, and the action that I took on both of those was to click. So it then generated that into Java code that I was able to use, leveraging that UFT Developer SDK. In the same way, if, for instance, if we were to say, well, I have this, I've created and recorded this big, long business process, but I need to go back and change one thing. Okay, instead of clicking on the speakers category, I want to click on the mice or the laptops category as a part of this automated test. But I don't want to obviously go back and re-record the whole process. So I just want to be able to identify the unique object properties about that one object and then replace those within my test. So here's where I can use the Object Identification Center. For those of you that have used UFT1 before, this is a similar concept to using the Object Spy, so that I can spy into the application under test and identify all of the unique properties about that specific object. So in this case, we'll do just that. We'll say, nope, instead of clicking on the speakers for this flow, we actually want to click on the mice category. So a couple of things that you'll see here is one, that we capture the hierarchy. So the parent-child relationship between the objects, obviously the web page of the Advantage Online Shopping page with the child object of the mice category. And I can see here's all of the different unique object properties that I can use in order to uniquely identify this object. So something along the lines of 30 different properties that I can use, not just CSS selector or XPath. So we're making our test more robust by being able to better utilize the unique properties about those objects. As well as you can see that there's a couple of stars here. So what UFT Developer Object Identification Center is doing is recommending to you the ones that are going to uniquely identify just this specific object. So if I come in and say, let's do a validation, just in case there's multiple objects that meet those. In this case, there's not. It's saying that there's only one object, one and only one object on the page that matches the inner text of my shop now and the tag name of div. Of course, you do not have to use the recommendations here. You can use any number of these by simply selecting those, as well as you can create the value of that specific object property as a regular expression as well. So if there was text or a digit or something along those lines that we wanted to uniquely identify that was dynamic, we could set that value on how we identify that as a regular expression as well. In this case, this is what I want to use. So I'm going to generate that code to the clipboard. And I'm going to replace, instead of clicking on the speakers link, we're going to click on the mice link. So I can see mice category link, and we want to click on it. So very quickly, we were able to either use that test recorder to be able to capture the full process, or we can use the Object Identification Center to uniquely identify all of the different object properties about that specific object, so that we can then copy that code to the clipboard and inject that into our test. So cutting down on that time that it takes to actually create the test, as well as making that test more robust, because we have a broader selection of things to uniquely identify each one of those objects in our application under test. So quicker test creation time and lower maintenance on those tests once we do create them. So from here, if I want to be able to reuse some of these objects across the enterprise, so be able to share these with my colleagues, to be able to, that is where we begin to talk about the concept of the application model. So here I'm going to create a new UFT developer item, in this case, a UFT developer application model item. Now, this is not, if I were a actual dev tester or automation engineer, quality engineer, I wouldn't be creating this locally within this specific project. I would have a application model project that could be stored and versioned as code, and I would be able to do a clone of that application model project and be able to use all of those application models, obviously, across the organization. In this case, because it's just me, I'm going to create it locally here within my specific project, but no, this is here to be able to be to enable reuse of all of these test objects across an enterprise. So I'll create this. We'll call it app model. And you'll actually see a new file be created called the app model with the file extension of test set repository. And I'm able to view this in both text. So I can see the XML version of the application module, again, because that's how we're storing and versioning this as code, but we provide, based on that plugin, the ability to look at it from more of a UI perspective as well. So I'm going to create a new test object, and I can manually add that object based on the name I want to give it, the name I want to reference it in the code, as well as the technology that I'm using and the unique properties that I'm using to identify it. In this case, I want to use the OIC, or Object Identification Center, to be able to identify objects within my application under test. So I'll click again to start spying, similar to how we did before. The difference here, though, once we add this, so I'll add our speakers category, there's going to be a couple of different options because we're using the Object Identification Center from our application model item. So one thing that you'll see is it's similar in the sense that I can see all of my unique object properties in their values. In the Object Identification Center, I can see the object hierarchy, parent-child relationship, as well as I can see the recommendations of what will uniquely identify this specific object. Where this begins to be a little bit different is these two buttons now appear. So the first thing that we can do is, okay, since this is a shared application model that I've cloned down from my Git repository that have been contributed to by all of the different dev testers and quality engineers across the organization, maybe somebody has already captured this object. So what I can do is, based on the object properties that I've selected, I can search the application model to be able to see if there's a matched, or the object has a match within the application model, as in if it already exists. It would recommend to me that, hey, this object already exists. You don't need to have this duplication of effort by selecting it and adding it into the application model. In this case, as you see here, that there's no objects in the application model because there's no objects at all in the application model because we just created it. So in this case, I will add that object to the app model. And it was added successfully. So I can see the name of that object, the name that I can reference in the code, and this I can change. So if I just wanted to call this speakers, I would be able to change that. And I could add a screenshot to that as well. And then I can see all of the object properties that I'm using to be able to uniquely identify this object. In this case, I'm just going to use the recommended ones, which is, in this case, the inner text and the tag name. So now, if I come into my test, I can then reference this app model. We'll call it my app model for this instance of it. And the context is within what we've defined as our browser. So now, instead of what you see here is being able to basically describe that object with code, now I'm leveraging how it's described within the application model so that this can be reusable, and I'm simplifying my code. So in this case, I can just simply type out my app model, and the hierarchy is the advanced shopping page and the speakers button, and we want to click it. So we've simplified our code as well as we've made this specific object reusable. And so cutting down on the time that it takes for maintenance, as well as cutting down on that duplication of work when we have already captured these objects and their unique properties. in a shared space. So from here, let's go ahead and let's do a quick run of our UFT developer test. So we should be able to launch the browser, and click on the mice link, navigate back to the home page, and then click on the speakers link within our application under test, in this case, Advantage Online Shopping. And it was successful. So we clicked on the mice, navigated back home, and now we're on the speakers category. So from here, another tool that is built into UFT Developer is the capability of doing verifications. So I can basically have a point within my test that verifies an object, whether that is or is an expected outcome and the actual outcome versus the expected outcome within my test. And I can make this verification smart. So not just if we don't get the expected outcome, fail the test and shut it down. Obviously, there's different use cases where we would want to continue on with our test even though we received a failure. So I have the ability and the control to either stop the test upon failure of a verification or continue on and just capture that as a result. And I can view those things in the report in the run results. So if I select to view my last run results from the run that we just did, I can see that our steps in the test was to be able to launch the browser, to navigate to our Advantage Online Shopping application. I cleared the cache, selected the mice category, navigated back home, and then to the speakers category, and everything within our test flow executed successfully. So showing that strong reporting capability so that if we did have a failure, I would be able to, one, understand the steps leading up to that failure, as well as the information and the data about what caused that failure, perhaps, and a screenshot included, so that I can either, from there, update my automation, update my script if that's the problem, if it's a unstable script, or if a defect needs to be reported based on the failure that we've received. I have all of that information and can include that potentially as an attachment or as in the description or details of the defect whenever I log that defect in whatever my defect tracking system is. So from here, to recap quickly, we talked about the quick test creation time by leveraging those project templates, whether that be a Cucumber project template, a testing project template that's able to leverage multiple unit test frameworks and build tools like JUnit and Maven. We leverage the UFT Developer SDK, which has a broad technology support. So we were able to, in this case, create automation against a web application, but that is no means the extent of the technologies that can be tested by UFT Developer. That extends to packaged applications like SAP and Oracle, as well as even terminal emulation. So being able to write automated tests against a green screen for mainframe. As well as we showed and talked about some of the tools that are built into UFT Developer, like the test recorder, the object identification center, and the application models, so that we can, again, cut down on that test creation time, as well as build more robust tests and build those tests in a reusable way, so that we're cutting down on test maintenance, which is one of the highest time sucks from an automation organization, is being able to maintain all of those automation assets, especially in today's world where we're having potentially hourly changes to our applications. So from here, I want to then talk about some of the capability as far as how this can be integrated into the CI/CD process, and how this is a important part and embedded into that process. So with that, I'm going to hop over to a existing test that I have that's a little more robust. So similar to the test that we just created, I'm testing a web application. I'm testing the Advantage Online Shopping application again. I have a number of steps in my before and after class, like being able to launch the browser and navigate to a URL, or checking if the browser is invalid or is valid, as well as closing that browser down after each test. And in this case, I have multiple test fixtures. So I have a test within this project to do some things around the tablets on my AOS website, the speakers category, the mice category, the headphones, and so on and so forth. So I have multiple tests that are part of this project, multiple test fixtures here, leveraging the JUnit framework to be able to do that. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to make a change to my application under test and see how that change is impacted, and how we can verify or check and understand that that change was actually a bad change and caused the build to break because we had a test that failed. So before I do that, if I come into my specific test, because this test speakers label is actually going to be the test that finds the problem from my code change, I'm just going to add a comment here that Mason is adding a new comment. So given that UFT Developer at its core is an SDK, so it's code, we can store and version these tests as code. So in this case, I'm going to commit this and push this to my Git repository as code. I can reference my commit message, and I can see the change that I made here. In this case, I was just adding a comment, and I'll commit and push this to my Git repo. From here, I actually want to go to my application source code and make that change to our application under test, and then see how the test that we just referenced is going to find that change and call it out as a failure. So on my application, as you can see here, Advantage Online Shopping, if I navigate back to the homepage, I have a number of different categories like headphones, mice, laptops, speakers, and tablets. What I'm going to do is I'm going to make a change to my application that is going to put my first name here. Instead of speakers, it's going to say Mason. Obviously, this is a e-commerce website where we drive revenue for our company. So, our hypothetical company here of Advantage Online Shopping. So absolutely, Mason the developer's first name should not be one of the product categories. So we want to be able to make that change, but also catch that change as a failure. So in that case, I'm going to make this code change in my source to Mason, and I will commit and push this to my source. So from here, I now want to kick off the CI/CD pipeline that has a number of different steps and jobs along the way that I'll talk about here in a moment. So let's navigate into this specific pipeline that we have in Jenkins. And I'm going to build this. So there's a couple of things, and I'll explain what is going on here. The first is that we're going to do a checkout. So we're going to do a checkout from the repository that I just committed my source code change to in AOS source. It's going to do a checkout from that repo. If I had selected to turn it on, I could do a Fortify source code scans for security vulnerabilities. I'm then going to build that module, and I'm going to deploy my application under test, the AOS, like I showed at the beginning, as new Docker container. So I'm basically going to take that change, package it up, shove it into a new Docker container, and redeploy it. And then from there, I'm going to have that UFT developer test that we added the comment to, and execute that as our regression to be able to see what this commit actually broke. In this case, you can see that one commit was made by me, Mason, and that was putting my first name on the home page of our application, which should not be the case. But our test is going to be able to catch that. So while that's running, I'll actually go to a previous run of this, and we can talk and see the results of that. And then we should see a browser pop up here in a moment. So I can see at a past run of this, which I did prior to this, is that I can see that I had a test result of a failure, and I can see the results of that specific report. In this case, I can see my full test flow. I had multiple tests like we talked about. I had a test for the mice category, I had a test for the laptops category, I had a test for headphones, and so on and so forth. In this case, my test speakers label test failed because I had a check in that test to actually verify that the speakers label did in fact say speakers, but what was found is Mason. So obviously that should not be the case. And in this case, our UFT developer test was able to catch that, and we're able to see that report directly within our CI tool, within that pipeline run. So if I navigate back, we should be able to see that that test is about to run. So it's deploying it in a new container, and then we should see our test start to execute from here. So the point in showing you all of this is that we're not just this standalone, UFT Developer is not just this standalone traditional test automation tool. This is embedded into development practices, CI/CD pipelines, so that you can leverage this to be able to have that high level of focus on quality earlier in the life cycle. So really, truly allowing you to shift left when it comes to building automation. So we should be able to see a browser window pop up and us begin to execute through some of those tests within our UFT developer test that we just referenced. So while that's running, are there any questions?
Is there a way that we can import our existing object repository?
From UFT?
From UFT, yeah.
Absolutely, great question. So yes, you have the ability, we offer a little utility that basically translates the object repository into a application model project so that you can reuse those objects that you've already created and put in a shared object repository. So yes, absolutely.
Okay, and is there a way for the libraries also?
As far as for like the function libraries?
Yes, which we have already written in UFT.
Right. So given that those are in, I'm guessing that those are in VB script, those functions, those would not translate. Because you're within UFT Developer, we would be using Java, JavaScript, or C# as a development language.
Okay.
Yep. And to your previous question, you can do this vice versa as well. So that if this within UFT Developer is happening earlier on in the life cycle, you can also translate that application model into a object repository that UFT1 can consume as well. So if we're, developer, dev tester is creating these things earlier on in the life cycle, then once it gets to QA, you begin running perhaps more end-to-end tests or more business process focused tests, then you can leverage and reuse the object in the object repository that has been created earlier on in the life cycle in the application model. So it goes both ways. You can translate a object repository into an application model, as well as a application model into an object repository.
Hey, Mason, can I interrupt quickly, please?
Please.
Thanks. Yeah, I just wanted to, on that previous comment about the libraries, you're absolutely correct. Obviously, the VB script libraries cannot be reused, but the functions that we have in our test factory common library, either Java or the .NET world, they can be reused, of course. So there's still a lot of functions that we've already written that we can reuse. For example, the date manipulation, spreadsheet handling, all that kind of stuff. Just one other thing to note is if you do want to integrate the test factory framework, we can integrate with the Java or the C# .NET, but we cannot with the JavaScript. So I just wanted to highlight that.
Great, that's great points. Thanks, Graham.
Thanks.
Yeah. So our pipeline is finished running, and obviously, as expected, we had a failure, and that failure was caused by our test, specifically the test for checking the speakers label. And I can see that I made one change to that test that Mason added a comment. I just added a comment, and then our run results, same as the one that we ran prior, is that the expected was speakers, and the text that was found is Mason, because in fact, I put my first name on the homepage of the application. So I actually made a change, deployed it as a new application, and our test found that error. All right. So with that, that is what I had prepared for the demo today. So we have, it looks like about 8 or 7 minutes for Q&A at this point, but to recap all that I showed there on sort of the second iteration was that we showed a UFT developer project leveraging JUnit as that unit test framework. I had multiple test fixtures, it was 5 tests to be exact, and obviously at its core, UFT Developer is a SDK and is code. So I was able to store and version that code, that test as code in my Git repository. And then I was able to execute all of those tests in that repository as a part of a larger CI/CD pipeline that actually found, which was on purpose, but it actually found a problem or a bad code that was written in the application by checking that label on our homepage of our website that said speaker. It was supposed to say speakers, but I actually put my first name, Mason, on the homepage of our application. But our UFT developer was able to, that was executed by a CI tool like Jenkins, was able to catch that change and report it as a failure. So with that, we got several minutes for any Q&A.
So will there be a recording of this that we can review later, or availability of a slide deck?
Yes to both.
Okay, great. I should probably contact Graham to get that information, right?
Yes, Bibin hosted this meeting and he's recording it. So as soon as I get that, I'll forward it to everybody.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thanks.
Yep. And I'll send the slide deck to you, Graham.
Perfect, thanks.
Hi, Mason. I've just got a quick question. It's Peter here. Just in the example that you showed there, where you changed the code and obviously the test failed. Is there a way from the reports there to verify which line of code the test actually failed on, like where you were doing the check for that name? You know what I mean?
Yeah, as far as the line of code in the test.
Yeah, like let's say like you had a test that was rather big, you're checking lots of elements, and it wasn't fresh in memory. You might struggle to find to know exactly where that check was. What line of code it is, and you can spend a bit of time going up and down. Searching for it. I'm just wondering if it's easy to see from the stack trace or anything.
Yep.
Yeah.
So it gives me the stack trace as well.
Yeah. Okay. Great.
And then in a more user-friendly way, we publish that in the run results here.
Okay. And actually, the other question I had was, in your example there, you used the UFT developer. If you had chosen UFT Selenium there for your example, can you, I assume that's for people who are maybe with Selenium or maybe want to, use existing Selenium tests. But can they also make use of things like the application model and the spy tools as well while coding it, while using Selenium, or is that just specific to UFT developer?
Absolutely, great, excellent question, and the answer is yes to all the above. So I can add to I can contribute or add to my existing Selenium tests. If I wanted to use all of the UFT developer sort of peripheral tools that are built in there, but still use the Selenium SDK, so write the code using the WebDriver, you could still do that while leveraging the Object Identification Center, and we have the OIC specifically for the Selenium SDK. So it's going to give you just CSS selector, XPath, and then the I think it's 6 or 7 additional locators that we contributed to that. So it will, extend how you identify those objects, making it more robust, as well as being able to create a application model project using Selenium as your code. So yes to all of those. And I can do that as new tests. I can do that to existing tests, and using those tools of the recorder, the OIC, and the application models for Selenium with the additional locators.
That's brilliant. Thanks very much.
Yes, sir.
Yeah,
Hi,
hi.
this is Marina. A quick question. We're utilizing Jira and TM4J as our agile tools. So is there a way, so in TM4J, we utilizing this as a test case location for us. Is there a way we can extend hand and just create our automation and somehow upload test cases to TM4J? Is there a way to extend this hand?
So I'm not familiar with TM4J as a test management tool. So I'd say that depends on what file types can that have. Does TM4J actually act as the repository for the automated assets, or just the test case? Or do you store your existing stuff in SCM today?
For example, it has the option to have a feature files. So basically, Cucumber for utilizing Gherkin. So yes, it is stored in the test cases.
Okay, but not the actual automated test asset, not the actual code that makes it. Okay, okay.
No, it has the ability to store the files, like a feature files or test case steps. However, not automation. You're typically right.
Got it. Okay, so in that case, that again depends on what format TM4J can consume as far as updating results. I'm sure it has some sort of REST API that, depending on how you executed that, whether you built your own framework for execution of those automated assets, or if you did that like I did today with the CI tool, then I'm sure there's a plugin out there that exists for, say, Jenkins for TM4J to update with test results of an automated run, for example. So I can't answer that fully just because I'm not familiar with TM4J, but showing many of those, like Qtest, and we have our own.
I was more talking about actual test case. So if I have a feature file in automation in UFT, can I upload this file? Like basically, is there any possibility to send this and import this in TM4J? But I understand that there is no.
Okay, so I think it would be the other way around. As far as process goes. So the feature file, I'm guessing there's a integration between TM4J and Jira, and that's why y'all have that connected. Okay, so does the feature file, do you create that as a user-defined field in Jira, or does that create it as its own entity type of feature file within TM4J that you can link to a user story? Okay, and then
attached to the story.
Okay, and then from there, do you have some sort of mechanism to, quote unquote, download that feature file into an IDE?
Currently, it's basically there is an export feature, so we can export those feature files.
Okay.
And basically save them somewhere. Yes, it's a possibility.
Got it. So that would really be where the UFT developer portion starts, is once you exported that feature file from TM4J into a IDE for the dev tester or whoever that person is to be able to create and translate that feature file into automation using Cucumber if you're using Java, that sounds like. So Cucumber would translate those steps in the feature file, the given when then, into methods in Java code, and then you could create the automation that makes up each one of those methods using the UFT Developer SDK. So it would be sort of a secondary relationship from UFT Developer to TM4J, not direct. The feature file would be what's managing that process. It would just be, is this feature file automated or manual?
I got you. Okay, thank you.
Absolutely.
Hey, thank you very much, Mason. I know that you said you have a hard stop, so I want to be conscious of that. You
Yes,
did
sir.
an
Thank you.
amazing job squeezing so much information into 1 hour. I was wondering how you were going to do that. I'm sure there are still lots more questions. I'm still here till the end of this week at Travelport. If anyone has any questions, please feel free to send them to me, and I can field them to Mason if I can't answer them myself. And I will make sure to send the link to the recording for this to everybody that's attended. Feel free to forward it on. So I guess with that, thank you very much, Mason, and everyone that attended.
Yeah, thanks everyone for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.